Thanks for joining us for an Every Nation Sunday sermon. This message is from our Hammersmith congregation. For more information on our church, or to see how you can be involved, please visit everynation.co.uk.
I want to speak today on living open to Jesus. Living open to Jesus. I want to say right up front, sometimes you go somewhere and you hear a message and it brings such amazing revelation, and somebody unpacks a passage in a way you've never seen before. And you think, this is amazing. This speaker's amazing. This God is amazing. This Bible is amazing. I have literally never seen that before. That is life-changing. I want to tell you right away, this isn't going to be one of those messages. In fact, what we're going to talk about today, many of you will have probably heard before. Many of you will be familiar with the story. Many of you will be familiar with the point that I want to make and encourage us to live by. But nevertheless, how often do we struggle in life because we don't do what we know? So today, I want to talk about living open to Jesus. And it's been an interesting week for me personally. Life has been quite full, as most of our lives are here in London. We never seem to be short of things to do, are we? Our to-do lists often tend to overflow, and sometimes we're busy doing other things. We don't even start our to-do list. You get to the end of the day and you think, I've been deliberately working my priorities as best I can, but it doesn't seem to have made any headway. There's been lots going on kind of around me. Life has been a bit confusing as well. Amanda and I saw Facebook reminded me yesterday or the day before that it's a year ago that we put our house on the market to sell it. And there have been many ups and downs along the way of us seeing a house that we were trusting for and putting our house on the market, and that house kind of not materializing, and then another house not materializing, then another house not materializing. And then it's supposed to be that we were all set to move and everything was in line, and then our buyer pulled out, so that didn't work out. And then this year, it's been more of the same, and it's like, Lord, what is going on? It's a bit confusing. There are personal issues as well. I've shared with you guys before, my dad is wrestling with cancer at the moment, and I spoke to him at the beginning of the week, and he had an operation to put some pins in his legs, and the operation went well, but he is not doing well physically, energy-wise, pain-wise in himself. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to do, and I was preparing to preach this week, and I want to tell you, I've actually wrestled more than I've ever wrestled with a message to prepare for today. And I've been reading through the Bible this year. I've been doing a Bible plan. It has some Old Testament passages and some New Testament passages, and I've been doing it on the Bible app. Any of you use the Bible app on your phone or your tablet? It's fantastic. All different Bible versions for free, audio versions, lots of different Bible plans that will be fantastic for you. I've been very thankful for the catch-up button. And if you ever used that, you read through the Bible and you have a reading every day, and then when you get a little bit, bit out of date, that you press the catch-up button, and that's grace for your situation, and it's just as if you never fell behind. That's amazing grace. But this week, actually, I haven't progressed with my Bible plan because I kind of got stuck in Luke 10, seeing some great things in that chapter. And sometimes it's good to kind of linger on what God is saying and what the Bible says, and go deep with that and hear what He's talked to you about. But I've prepared, if I'm honest, and I just want to kind of share a little bit of the story of this week with you, but I've prepared several messages this week. I started off looking at the sending out of the 72 laborers right at the beginning of Luke 10. You see, Jesus says the fields are ripe to harvest, but the laborers are few. And he says, pray the Lord for the harvest to send out the laborers. And he sends out 72 of his disciples to preach the gospel, to declare the kingdom, to heal the sick, to cast out demons. And I thought, man, if I preach on that in church, wouldn't that be an amazing thing? Doesn't London need that? So I crafted this message, and I looked at what it means to be a laborer, and I was reminded of how, as Lydia said earlier, J. John told that we should pray, and we should care, and we could share, and all the ways that we could live this. And then I got to the end of it, do you know what? That's a great message, but it's not what God is saying. Okay, God. Okay, it's got to be something else. I know it's in this chapter somewhere. So I moved on, and you see there's the story when the expert of the law comes up to Jesus, and he says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And they have a conversation about what does the law say about loving the Lord your God with all your heart and all your strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. And the lawyer tries to justify himself, and he says, but okay, I get that, but who's my neighbor? And he's kind of trying to get out of it. And you see the story, which many of you will be familiar with, of the Good Samaritan. Of what does it actually mean to love your neighbor? Who is your neighbor? How do you love them? And I thought, well, this is a great story, isn't it? I mean, don't we need some of that in London? What does it mean to be a good neighbor? And we see in that story how love does stuff. It acts, it sacrifices, it works, it's generous, it's lavish. And Lydia was going to be sharing on this initiative we're doing with our neighbors. So I thought, well, obviously, this is the word for this week. And I got to the end of that, having some really rich time in the Bible and with some commentaries and praying it through. And I just had this niggling sense, which again, I believe was the Holy Spirit's like, I'm glad you've got that, but that's not what I wanted you to talk about. Lord, what is going on? And then I read the next story. Luke 10, 38 to 42. And it's a story which many of you will be familiar with, about Mary and Martha. And as I was praying that, and we'll read it in a minute, but I felt God say, that's it. That's what I want you to talk about. Tell them that there's only one thing that really matters. Because you've been looking at all these stories. It's great. This is what kingdom living looks like. There's work to be done. There is labor. There's labor in the Lord's strength. There's being a good neighbor. There's all these things that our city desperately needs. But if we miss the one thing that really matters, then we miss it completely. So let's look at the story. Luke 10, 38 to 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." Have you ever felt that way? It's like, oh man, I'm just working so hard, and I'm even working. It's not even for me, Lord. It's for you. I'm working so hard for you, God, and these seem to be the right things. These seem to be the good things. It's like, my sister's not helping me. You don't even seem to be helping me, and you guys are just hanging out together. Like, what's going on, Lord? I'm frustrated. And Jesus said, "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." You know, we see in the story, as I said, many of you will be familiar with this story. Many of you will have heard messages preached from this story before. Many of you will have heard about Martha's busyness and Mary's drawing close to Jesus. But we see in this story a pattern which I think is prevalent in London particularly. We live in a city which gets very busy, which works very hard. And even in the church, even with what we do for God, we can slip into that same pattern of being very busy and working very hard. And Martha is working very hard for Jesus. She is preparing the meal. She's opened her house. She's doing hospitality. All the things that the Bible instructs her to do. All good things, we would agree, right? And they're good things for Jesus as well. But her work is distracting her from Jesus. Her work for Jesus is distracting her from Jesus. And that can be a tendency in how we work. Sometimes it's our work for ourselves that distracts us from Jesus. Sometimes it can even be our work for Jesus that distracts us from Jesus. But the point is, she's working hard for a good cause, and she's losing her soul in the process. She's grumpy with her sister. She's grumpy with Jesus. Like, Jesus, why haven't you told her what to do? Why haven't you sorted her out? Why haven't... Surely, somebody should be helping me here. And Jesus, as always, goes straight to the heart of the problem. You see, it says she's distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you are worried or distracted or anxious or pulled apart, depending on the translation that you read. It's like your mind is all over the place. I'm here and you're here, there, and everywhere. Have you ever experienced that in London? Have you experienced that in your life? Maybe even when you try and sit with Jesus, you start out on your phone, on the Bible app, then a WhatsApp message comes in. Let me just reply to that. And then something else happens. Man, sometimes I go into this thing, I even forget what I went on there for. Do you ever have that, or is that just me? It's just me. But we live in this overwhelming information age, this world where there is so much stuff to do, where it's so hard to focus, we can so easily get distracted, where we can get bogged down with worries and anxieties and cares. And whether it's a house situation or a work situation or a school situation or relationships, how are they working out? All of these things can bog us down. And these aren't bad things. These are things that Jesus cares about. These are things that it's important sometimes to do well. But if we do those things well and miss Jesus, then we've got a huge problem. And he says, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is necessary. One thing is vital. One thing is fundamental. One thing is foundational. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. How often do we get worried and upset and tired and worn out and all over the place because we neglect the one thing that Jesus says matters? And that one thing is drawing close to the one who provides life in the first place, Jesus. Now, I want to explain something a little bit from the story. It says that Mary is sitting at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. And that term doesn't just mean, my point here isn't just that basically you go through life and you sit down and you just talk to Jesus and you never arise from that spot. You never do anything. You just sit there, me and Jesus. That's not what it's talking about here. The sitting with Jesus, sitting at Jesus' feet, is actually talking about a rabbi and his disciples. A rabbi's disciple would, in the position of sitting at Jesus' feet, would be getting as close as possible to learn as much as possible, to become as much as possible like the one that he or she was following. So sitting at Jesus' feet doesn't necessarily mean just sitting down and communing with Jesus, although I would say it includes that. And sometimes we struggle because it doesn't include that. But it also includes walking with Jesus through life. It includes knowing that Jesus is with us in everything we do. It includes growing to become like him. It's not necessarily the physical position, but it is the position of being close to him, of getting close and staying close. And although it's kind of a little bit of a funny story maybe in terms of the different messages that I prepared before teaching today, I thought there was a powerful context in that chapter because it talks about a lot of work for God. It talks about a lot of things that we can do, that we should do for God, that Jesus calls us to do. But Jesus doesn't want your life to be just something you do for him. He wants it to be something you do with him. Not just something you do for him, but something you do with him. And that's why we need to learn to be open to Jesus in everything that we do. Now, my story of growing in relationship with Jesus and learning to walk with him, I grew up in the church. I grew up in, well, not literally in the church, but I grew up going to church. My mum and dad took me to Sunday school. And I knew that I'm supposed to be growing this relationship with God. But what would generally happen is we would go on this Bible week once a year, where with a big, great youth ministry, great kids ministry, we've got one of those coming up, actually, like a youth summer camp. You can get involved in that. That'll be awesome. Teenagers, go for that. It can change your life. People go and help with that. That could change your life and change another person's life as well. But, these are great things. But I would have this big, high spiritual encounter of meeting with God, of kind of being born again, rededicating my life. And then throughout the rest of the year, I'd kind of like take this, petered, getting a little bit worn down, getting more and more distant, getting more and more distant. The next year, it's back on youth camp, and it's like, oh, God is amazing. I remember what he did for me. He's amazing. I meet with him. He loves me. His grace is sufficient for me. His power is available. And then over the year, it would kind of trickle down a bit. Has anybody kind of lived life a bit like that? It's just me. And I suppose for me, the distances between those moments kind of decreased. It became like an annual thing to a weekly thing maybe, or like a monthly thing. I'd have this big, great encounter with God. And then I'd get a little bit depleted, and then I'd come back to him. That's not how Jesus wants us to live. Drawing close to him, getting full, and then going out and working. Drawing close to him, getting full, and then going out and working. Jesus wants to walk with us. I remember actually when I started working for the church, once I used to ride in on my motorbike from West Drayton, coming down the M4, and I was working hard, and I was doing all the things that I knew how to do, and I was kind of in my Bible, and I was reading, and then I was kind of doing the work and all those sorts of things. And I got to the end of one day, and I was pretty finished. I was pretty tired, and I was riding home on my motorbike, and it ran out of petrol. And I was starting to walk it, starting to push it to the nearest petrol station, and I felt God say to me, it's hard when you do it in your own strength, isn't it? And walking with Jesus is not like filling up petrol in your tank so that you can go for a burn and then just make sure you come back and fill up again. Jesus doesn't want your life to be something you do for him, but something you do with him, sitting at his feet. So yes, it's important to have regular focus time. Yes, it's important to draw close to him. But it's even more important to find ways of going through life with Jesus. You start the day with Jesus, you continue the day with Jesus, remembering he's there in every situation, and you finish the day with Jesus. Now, I don't know what it takes for you to do that. For me, it can be really helpful to go for a walk in the park while listening to worship music, or a run in the park if I'm feeling particularly energetic. Reading my Bible, that's definitely helpful. Sometimes it gets a little bit dry and I need to switch to somebody preaching the Bible. Sermon jams on YouTube I've found are amazing, or scripture jams. You might have come across those where you get clips of sermons or clips of the Bible and it mixes up with music, and I just stick those in and I meditate on them. I remember when I was at work, before I worked for the church, I would go out during my lunch break, and I would need a reminder halfway through the day that God was with me, particularly for some periods when it was quite dark and hard. And I would go out at lunchtime, and I'd have that as my routine of just getting out and walking with Jesus. You've got to figure out what it takes for you to stay connected to Jesus. But I want to tell you, it's a very dangerous thing to work for Jesus without being with Jesus, without sitting at Jesus' feet. You know, Jesus called his disciples with this great invitation to follow him. He said, "Come, follow me, and I will make you." When he went up a mountain, it says he called some of his disciples to come, that they would be with him and that he could send them out. And his last words as he sent them out, as he was ascending back to heaven, it's like, go and make disciples, go and do all this stuff, and surely I will be with you, even to the ends of the earth. Jesus wants to do life with us, and he wants us to do life with him. How are you doing with that? I've been a pastor for many years now, and I'll often meet with people, and I will talk about how are you doing. And I've also learned to ask the question, how are you and God doing? And there's a direct correlation between somebody who's struggling, just about every time, somebody who's struggling in life and somebody who is neglecting their relationship with God. Every time. I want to encourage you, do life with Jesus. It's funny, last night I was asking God the question, Lord, what has this week really been all about? Because, I mean, I've been doing all the right stuff, I'm sure. I've done loads of Bible reading. I've done loads of praying. Even yesterday, on Saturday, I went and I walked in the park and I just spent loads of time just praying, God, what are you saying? What are you imparting? What do you want to do? Meditating over the passages, meditating over the sermons that I'd prepared. I went and sit in the coffee shop and I did a bunch of sermon prep on kind of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Lots of rich time there, and still coming with that sort of like, that's not quite it. And I was just lying there after I'd heard God say, just tell them that there is one thing that's important. I said, Lord, what was that all about? I've been asking you all week what to preach about. I've been asking you, as I've done loads of Bible reading, I've done loads of praying. It's like, couldn't you have just given me the answer straight away? I would have certainly been a lot more prepared than I am right now to deliver this message. Do you know what I felt God say to me? He said, I thought it would be nice for us to spend some time together. Do you know what the funny thing is this morning? Honestly, I am... Message-wise, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm the most unprepared I've ever been for a message. I hope that what I've said has helped you. It certainly isn't at the peak of my crafting abilities to deliver it. And I pray that God will make up whatever is lacking. I mean, I don't take these things lightly. But I have had this amazing peace all morning from when I stepped in, that God is with me. It's like even in worship, just at the end there, I was just sitting down here. It's like, man, how deep the Father's love for us. Oh, that's amazing. Sitting in wonder. Have you made time to sit in wonder lately? There are many things that we can do. There are many things that we should do if we want to see God's kingdom come on earth. But guys, there's only one thing that we must do. There's one thing that we must do without fail. That's draw close to Jesus, stay close to Jesus, walk with Jesus. I mean, what does he say? Is anyone thirsty? Let him come to me and drink. Out of his innermost being will come streams of living water. The Bible says in him is the fountain of life. And we wonder why we run short of life when we drift out of his presence, when we stop to walk with him. there are many things that you will need to do in life. But there is one thing that you must do. And that's live open to Jesus.